one aspect that people needs to understand, first of all, is that market capitalization, Bitcoin is starting to be pretty big. Yeah, it's still small when you look at the gold market. If you look at the gold's market cap, the amount of gold in the world, if you were to buy all, it's about 20 times more the market cap of gold and of that of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin could go by a factor of 20 and matches that of gold, because you can't compare one Bitcoin versus the price of gold, 1 ounce of gold. And I mean, it's like comparing apple and oranges kind of thing, because they're two different, Bitcoin was a totally arbitrary number of exactly where you put the decimal points, But when you look at the market cap, this is where you can compare both. And we're 20 times lower Bitcoin than gold. And that will be an impact on multiple fronts. When Bitcoin matches the market cap of gold, all those people that traditionally invested in gold as really the safe haven, they will now start to look at, well, okay, now I really need to look at Bitcoin just as a good contender. It's been here for more than 15 or maybe 20 years by the time that happens, whatever that is. So it's really demonstrated that it's safe and so on. So you'll have a mindset, but at the same time, when Bitcoin matches that of gold, the stability of the Bitcoin price will be also matching pretty much that of gold. When you look at the stability of the price or instability of the price of Bitcoin when it was a very tiny market cap, it was just the equivalent of all those altcoins that are extremely small and extremely volatile. Bitcoin was like that in the past. Sometimes people forget it, but it was a baby at some point. I'm not sure if you know about Black Rock Desert. That's where they have this giant thing every.
That's a Burning Man.
Burning Man is held there. So we went there in June before anything of that happened, and we went camping on BLM land, federal land, that you just get there and park, put up our tent, and it was not on the sand itself, on the flat desert, on the flat bed, but instead just a little bit off, so we could see it, and it was just quiet, nobody around for 5-10 miles around. And camping in there, so you watch the skies at night, and because it's desert, so
that's exactly really it. Oh, Paul, that sounds like magic, eh? Awesome.
But you have that too in Australia.
Oh, we do. We've got a lot. So camping's a big part of our culture here, and it's just because if we want to go, let's imagine you just want to go away for the weekend to like a little bed and breakfast. You would be lucky to get away with 180 to 200 US a night. And that's not even a nice one. That's not even like a fancy place. So what most people tend to do is they just go camping. And then that'll be like, say $20 or something like that.
Okay.
And it was surprising to me as a South African, because I've been here 5.5 years. I just became a citizen actually. And it was weird because I used to go away every weekend virtually in South Africa because it was cheap. It's really cheap. And it's like, no, we go camping. So we've now got a full kit, and we love it though. It's beautiful just being out in nature and peace and quiet. And Australia's full of it, Phil. Yeah. It's vast.
Yeah.
So you're one of those rare Bitcoiners who has done the work. So many of us just sit on the sidelines and scream and shout at what we call shitcoins, but we don't do the work. That's the truth. I spent a couple of years in crypto media, so I kind of give myself a pass because I got to see how the sausage is made. But having read your book now, I've been really impressed by just the way you dive into each of the coins, because I never did that.
Okay, you're talking about this?
Not talking about Satoshi. No, I'm talking about Bitcoin versus altcoins.
Okay.
Your more recent book.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not normally the case. You see somebody who understands Bitcoin as well as all of these others and makes nuanced arguments. So I'm really pleased we've got like a chance to chat today, because most of the people I would talk to just dismiss crypto and say it's all a load of garbage. And I always like to sense check myself with people who a bit more nuanced.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. I wanted to always to be, it's like there's always too many people that are in any kind of field you can think about that will get into some sort of a feeding themselves into their own thoughts. They have set up their mind into a directions, and they actually are getting biased in some way without realizing it. They might be right, they might be wrong, but the point is, when you're creating this bias, then you're not actually looking at the other angles of things. So I was really trying to make sure, is this really the right thing? And when you think about it, it's exactly that. I mean, Bitcoin is simple. When you bring it up very rapidly, it's like, okay, decentralization is actually the number one thing that we need to look at. And the second thing is how to achieve it. We need the most powerful form of mechanism and consensus, and that's proof of work, because it's the most simplest, it's the most easy to verify, meaning number of zeros, and that alone, you cannot have more than one proof of work by design. Even though you're using a different hash mechanism, you're always subject to a possible 51% attack so easily with the power that is behind Bitcoin. So it's amazing, all those Bitcoins out there, all those altcoins like that out there that are using proof of work, and some of them have been using proof of work which shot to 5.6. That's even more insane when you consider that then any kind of Bitcoin miners can redirect this thing and make a 51% attack. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bitcoin Gold.
I've actually heard about it there, and yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear your take. But perhaps before we jump into that, I'd love to maybe just for the sake of the audience there, Phil, who've kind of, I typically give a little bit of an intro in the beginning. Most of my audience is in Australia, and I thought maybe we could just start with a very quick high level, like who is Phil Champagne, and what are you most known for in the Bitcoin world? And maybe what's your background? I mean, because that's always an interesting thing too.
Yeah. So what surprised people, sometimes, I'm from a part of Quebec, Canada, that is called Eastern Townships. And that's where most of the Americans during the American Revolution, most of the loyalists to King George at the time, they migrated north, because they wanted to still be with the king, and they were considered a bunch of loyalists, and they would have been treated badly by the winning party. So they move up to Canada, and most of them established camps around their town, namely Sherbrooke is one of those towns. And that's where I grew up and went to university there. And that's just a little bit more than about half an hour from the border with Vermont. So it's very close.
Yeah. Okay.
Although Montreal is about 3/4 of an hour of the border from New York. I mean, pretty much 90% of the Canadian population is within 100 miles of the border with USA. But so I never actually was a big fan of real cold. And also the interest was, at some point I had an opportunity to work at a company in Santa Barbara. So I moved there. I'm software engineering, so networking and all that. And so from there, eventually switched to Cisco Systems in Santa Barbara, and eventually had a transfer in 2005 to Raleigh, North Carolina. So that's why in the book of Satoshi, it's referenced Raleigh, North Carolina. But in 2015, I migrated back to the Bay Area, California, for work again. And eventually, now I decided it's enough with the taxes. And last winter, we migrated here. So at least 2023 is tax-free at the state level. Yeah.
Okay. So being a software engineer obviously enabled you to look at things a little bit deeper. And to actually look at the underlying software architecture, and so talk to us then a bit about Bitgold, because you were talking about proof of work earlier, and kind of relay that story there, because there are a bunch of proof of work alternative cryptocurrencies out there, like Doge, as I understand, that could easily be kind of knocked out if Bitcoin miners decided to point the hash power there, as I understand. Tell us the story about Bitgold. I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah. So Bitcoin Gold, I think it was 2 years ago. I think it happened twice, an exchange got hacked. Basically, they got fooled with a 51% attack, because the attacker, basically, they mined secretly a separate blockchain and on the public, officially, what people thought will be because it was a hard fork, but nobody knew about it because he was keeping the attacker basically holds his blocks. He does not propagate them.
Yeah.
So everybody believes that's the one, it's safe. He moves his Bitcoin gold to an exchange, and the exchange then register those Bitcoin gold. He transfer that for Bitcoin, extract those Bitcoin, and then suddenly release the real one where actually still that transaction never happened. So now he still have the Bitcoin gold. Now he's got the Bitcoin from the Bitcoin gold transfer. So $70,000 was lost by the exchange because the exchange realized they gave him that Bitcoin, but they don't have the Bitcoin gold, and so on. And so that kind of attack is one of the way the exchange are protecting themselves is that to hold basically for something like 2 or 3 weeks of block confirmation before you can actually start trading. So think about it. It's 10 minutes for Bitcoin. Everybody says it's slow and all that.
Yeah.
But when you think about those coins with 51% attack possibility for them so the exchange, it's going to be 2 weeks for you for this coin.
Wow.
And it shows the power. The proof of work really needs a single one. Because otherwise all the other ones are. Because even 2 weeks, somebody could wait even longer and beats them again. And so obviously there's a risk reward and all that in terms of all that. But, it's really ridiculous,
So essentially what you're saying is when it comes to proof of work, there's a kind of winner takes all kind of type of thing. Because, and even Michael Saylor has kind of said something along the lines of like, he goes, this thing about Bitcoin's dominance is just, he says like, it's bullshit because it's like you should actually be comparing it against other proofs of work coins, of which it has got like 99+% of the market cap. So I guess, Phil, how do you, when people ask you, and I mean, whether they're Bitcoiners or normies, doesn't matter, how do you typically distinguish Bitcoin from the others? Do you sort of go, there's one in the other, or is there a more nuanced way of thinking about this?
So the way I wrote my book was trying to appear to be as unbiased as possible, although some people will argue that I was not that much unbiased. But the point I want to make is that the simple point is like proof of work is the simplest form, the most secure one, and it can only be one. So the first thing. The second thing is pretty much all the other altcoins overall with time, they lose value compared to Bitcoin. They might gain in the beginning, and obviously they have those spikes, during the altcoin seasons. So from a perspective, they are good for traders, but for long-term holders, it's really bad. Even if you like the what they're doing or something about they're allowing whatever. I'm a big artist and I like NFT. First of all, I don't know anything about NFT. I don't understand the whole thing. I'm not a collector. Don't have that mindset. So for me, it's just like foreign to me. But imagine someone is really passionate about those things. They still should only own a little bit of those coins, just enough to pay for those transactions on those platforms, whether it's Ethereum or whatever, because the impact over long term is you better hold the bulk of your investment into Bitcoin when you're looking at the long term. Now, if you're a trader again, when you have those craziness that's going on, it's always more advantageous as a trader. It's like, okay, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin, buy those things. And there you go. They go through a spike. I sell back and they go back into Bitcoin, with all the impacts of capital gain and all that. But the benefits of that is just in terms of a trader in terms of wealth. So for me, the best will be eventually if we have some development that's going on that will be layer 2, layer 3, or whatever over Bitcoin, that the currency will still be, so that those people that are passionate about NFT or whatever that is are on Bitcoin. At least their bulk of investment will be in Bitcoin. And I think that eventually we'll have all those things that will be surfacing in some way made available in Bitcoin, because the layer 2 as it is, as we know it, the Lightning Network, is not going to be like this forever. It's going to be evolve. It's going to be getting more interesting. And just like the coin pool, for example, concept, coinpool.org, I think, I can remember. It's allowing, instead for a UTXO to be tied up, instead of just 2 people for Lightning Network, then there'll be 10 people into a pool, basically, and they can be connected with the other point. There's some updates, but it just showed that the development, the thinking is going on like this, and we're going to be surprised eventually. Wow, we have this thing. It's like a highway now for cars, and think about how things were in the 50s. Suddenly highways have appeared. And all those guys with horse buggies that were saying those cars can't go on any kind of thing. Well, we have all the infrastructure developing over and over and over again. These are the points I mentioned to any people that want to be interested into the space, that focus on Bitcoin, because the other ones you need to have a mindset of a trader. Otherwise, yeah.
Okay. And what is it about Bitcoin specifically that makes it ingestible as opposed to the others, though? Because someone will say, okay, yeah, and generally they're losing value against Bitcoin over a long enough time horizon. We've seen that over the last month in particular. I've noticed that the sort of ETH Bitcoin trading pair is down 20%. And so, I mean, that's great to my life. Always the narrative, well, when Bitcoin runs, these alts run a lot harder. And there's also discussion, well, maybe we're not going to see another alt season given the amount of regulatory stuff on the go. But if someone's saying, but why is Bitcoin more valuable inherently? Why are these things going down? What's your response to that?
So, yeah, I think the one aspect that people needs to understand, first of all, is that market capitalization, Bitcoin is starting to be pretty big. Yeah, it's still small when you look at the gold market. If you look at the gold's market cap, the amount of gold in the world, if you were to buy all, it's about 20 times more the market cap of gold and of that of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin could go by a factor of 20 and matches that of gold, because you can't compare 1 Bitcoin versus the price of gold, 1 ounce of gold. And I mean, it's like comparing apple and oranges kind of thing, because they're two different, Bitcoin was a totally arbitrary number of exactly where you put the decimal points, But when you look at the market cap, this is where you can compare both. And we're 20 times lower Bitcoin than gold. And that will be an impact on multiple fronts. When Bitcoin matches the market cap of gold, all those people that traditionally invested in gold as really the safe haven will now start to look at, well, okay, now I really need to look at Bitcoin just as a good contender. It's been here for more than 15 or maybe 20 years by the time that happens, whatever that is. And so it's really demonstrated that it's safe and so on. So you'll have a mindset, but at the same time, when Bitcoin matches that of gold, the stability of the Bitcoin price will be also matching pretty much that of gold. When you look at the stability of the price or instability of the price of Bitcoin when it was a very tiny market cap, it was just the equivalent of all those altcoins that are extremely small and extremely volatile. Bitcoin was like that in the past. Sometimes people forget it, but it was a baby at some point.
Yeah.
And so this volatility, you can also see it when you compare gold with silver. Silver has been around a factor of 50 to 80 to 1 in terms of price with gold. And since the beginning of the 20th century, and except in 1980, when the frenzy was happening, where the price of silver went from $1 to 50, while the price of gold went from $35 to 800. And so the ratio of gold silver shrank to 15 to 1. Obviously, then things crashed really hard for both of them, but way more for silver. So when the frenzy comes in, the same thing will happen with altcoins. And whenever there will be a frenzy, a bunch of altcoins, tiny ones you never heard about. It just jumped up by a factor of 5 in 2 weeks. Oh, yeah, okay, I never heard about it. I don't know what's going on with that. But it's just, they're so small. Yeah, obviously, yeah, okay. But again, it's more like perfect for traders, but don't stay away from and you don't invest this into the long term. It's Bitcoin is there as the real money, as the gold equivalent, and see all the other stuff as completely speculation.
Yeah.
And so that's the major point. And another point I want to bring up is during the Weimar Germany hyperinflation, the price of gold was actually extremely fluctuating, like it could go down by 30% one day and jumping up by 100% the next 2 days or something like this, And this is because the people had to speculate at the same point. You could not stay in the Dutch mark. So the speculation mindset was overdrive. Everybody was forced to speculate, otherwise they will lose.
Yeah.
And when every time that we have those big asset price, when they start to flood and print, Federal Reserve and Bank of Australia and all that, then it fuels all the assets and it allows, basically, you see a bunch of money coming back into the asset class at some point with waves and waves. But people realize, it's like, okay, it's eventually and unconsciously people realize, I need to speculate. Otherwise, well, most people, that's their reaction when they don't know anything about this. Oh, Bitcoin's so pricey, I'm going to go into those small thing. And when they could be just securely investing in Bitcoin and not having to worry about the downside of it, overall,
Yes.
it's going to be there. And over the long term, Bitcoin is going to do better than any of those altcoins that are showing up.
Yeah, kind of what you're saying for is two things. The one is like a different version of Gresham's law where people will flock to the strongest form of money. And so that kind of ratio of gold to silver was really important. Gold was, until Bitcoin, I guess, the best form of money that we had, or natural money, if you want to call it that, or hard money. And you could look at and say, well, that's what Bitcoin represents. And if these other cryptocurrencies are trying to compete as monetary goods, despite the fact they've got centralized foundations and that sort of thing, they will never be able to attract that kind of market cap. And then the other thing you're saying, which I think is also that might not even resonate for somebody who's a Keynesian or somebody who doesn't necessarily just care about hard money or think about philosophy of Bitcoin or its promise in terms of human rights and all that. Maybe they're just going like, let's just have a look at this from strictly an investment. It's like, do you want to invest in my startup? I'm going to IPO it. It's 2 cents. Tomorrow it's 4 cents. So you could have doubled your money. And then it's like 1 cent. Or do you want to buy Apple? You want to buy like $1 trillion juggernaut?
Yeah.
Your choice. So, where's the value accrued here? And so the traders enjoy those games with the micro caps because 99% of the time those are not investable. They're just ideas that never really have a product market fit. And so I think those are the two good ways of framing it. Now, one thing that we'll touch on consensus mechanisms later, because I really enjoyed kind of your breakdown on that. But let's also talk now about the decentralization aspect, because it's something that kind of annoys me when I see a lot of these crypto projects talking about decentralization. So I think the question becomes, okay, why does decentralization matter in the first place? And then when we're talking about decentralization of what? What are we talking about? Like investors? Is it the nodes or what is it? And then the third part is really like, okay, so we're talking about decentralization now. What does it actually mean in terms of, is it black or white? Is it a spectrum? Are you somewhere along there? Or is it like a Bitcoiner type mindset? Well, you can't be half pregnant. You're either pregnant or not. Let's talk about your views around decentralization, why it matters, what it means. And I guess, the whole discussion of, is it on a spectrum or not? Because you touch on that in your book there, Phil.
Yeah, definitely. The point that needs to be understood is the decentralization. We have to ask ourselves, what exactly does that bring us? And first of all, if you want to defend the importance of decentralization, you need to actually specify what is the threat and exactly why you need it. And one of the things that we can right away see is the gold standard. For those who at least understood the history of what happened they understand that gold never had really the benefits of being able to compete with all the derivatives that were way more convenience. We were moving towards an electronic world, and well, gold, you can't. I tried as much as I can to send gold with my cell phone. It doesn't get through the window, the glass, and this has meant that Bitcoin needed gold needed a representation in the electronic world, derivatives, and therefore this derivatives then could not be matching one-to-one necessarily, and so easily you can have those inflated values and so on. Even today, if you were to use a blockchain and says, okay, all those XYZ coin will be backed by 1 ounce of gold. The problem that you still going to have is, well, who's going to be auditing this gold to make sure they're not making up more gold coins, pretending to be owning more than gold coins in their vault than in reality what's representing in the blockchain. So regardless if the medium on the electronic world is decentralized, or you use whatever you want as a consensus and pretend it, even Bitcoin as a token on the Bitcoin, say it's possible. Well, you cannot make that one-to-one necessarily possible, because you're going to have someone who's going to be storing that gold, and that's the central point where nobody can verify as easily as with Bitcoin, where you just look at the blockchain, which is equivalent to, you look at the mountain, everybody can look at the mountain and see, oh, well, the peak of the mountain is full of snow. It'll be obvious to anyone looking. And that's what happened when you look at the Bitcoin blockchain. Everyone could look. There's that many Bitcoin up there, and here's my Bitcoins are still in the blockchain. They haven't moved or whatever. So that's the key point that is very important. The importance of decentralization is also to make sure that no one can seize your Bitcoin or change that, prevent you from spending or putting in accounts, all those things where the truckers of Canada were facing with the Bank of Canada, with the Canadian government, for example.
Yeah.
So that's when you realize these points is to prevent any government to have a strong importance and an additional impact, because when they get you with an financial incentive, a lot of people, they can really grasp citizens of a country. They can put them into a really the difficult position, and they can control them more through financial means with a centralized currency. And so again, Bitcoin, they would not. So that's the importance of decentralization.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if we look at some of the other cryptocurrencies, the challenge often is that ordinary people, let's just say like me, wouldn't be able to run a node, because firstly, I don't have 32 ETH. I also don't have the technical competency to be able to set it up. And maybe I'm wrong here, but last time I checked, there was something like half of Ethereum that was effectively run on Amazon Web Servers and Microsoft Azure.
Yes.
So to my mind, it starts to really beg the question, what is the point of a blockchain if half of the network could be switched off at a moment's notice by virtue of an order by the government to say, we don't like this, switch this stuff off, and like that, half of it's off. So it just seems to defeat the point if you're going to rely on mega corporations to form your database structure. And can we not just achieve the same thing with some, isn't this just decentralization theater? Can we not just achieve the same thing by going, I'm just going to have a really efficient centralized database and here are the rules?
Yes, and you bring up a very good point. I can't remember if I mentioned that in my book, but there are a lot of those proof of stake currencies, coins, that the miners, the delegators, the verifiers, or whatever the name they give, are running on clouds. Either so you're going to be Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, or whatever, there are 4 or 5 major companies. And so it's like, when you look at all those 4 or 5, well, that means, it's like, well, 70% or 80% maybe of all their nodes are running on those major coins. So if there was something to happen there, and some of them, including Ethereum, they need a 85% quorum and the approval of a block. Otherwise, it's, they choke. And well, I think they modify this, that they reduce the quorum as the time passes until it works. Okay, and eventually you're at 40% quorum. But yeah, this is it facilitates. Oh, it's so easy. We're going to use a cloud on their proof of stake. While proof of work, no, you can't do that on on the cloud. You really need dedicated hardware and so on, and the incentive is there. And so that's a key point. You're totally right.
Yeah,
totally right.
Okay, and then I suppose the other thing is, one thing you mentioned in your book is that there are a lot of scams and a lot of people just go out there just looking to make a quick buck, effectively trying to print themselves money. So it's all about being able to create your own currency, allocate to your friends and family and early investors, market the hell out of it and dump it, right? The classic pump and dump. No different to what's been done in TradFi for years. But then you say there are some people who you believe have good intentions, potentially, who sincerely believe what they're trying to pursue, and that there might in fact be some projects that have some sort of use. So I was keen to get your take on, like, if you were to allocate a percentage, what percentage of these projects are legit and have real intentions, and then which of the projects do you think are at the very least interesting and shouldn't be dismissed as complete garbage?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Sorry.
So one of the Shane, actually, the guy is a very good guy that is running this thing, and he lives in New Hampshire. It's one of those. It's really to do the equivalent of media over sharing media using a blockchain. And if you read, you might remember.
Yes, I remember. I can't remember the name. It's not Labry, Labr.
Oh, yeah.
That one.
It's very close to that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the concept is great when you think about it. I mean, how could it be achieved? I mean, it's just a matter of, okay, you want to reward those that are holding those documents that'll be easy to pick up and so on. It's basically a giant distributed database where records are there and people are holding this, and then you pay in some way with the currency in question. Those things. Could this eventually be done with Bitcoin? Maybe, it could be at some point. I think we cannot exclude possibility. It's always going to be there. We've been surprised with Lightning Network. Nobody saw it coming. But these are concepts that are there's so many of those things where we don't know in terms of what silly ideas eventually would lead to a brilliant idea. And I mean, I look at those who were trying to make flying machines in the 1800s, how silly they were, and eventually the proper kind of machine was invented by the Wright brothers.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it's maybe a silly example, but the point is we don't know how things will go. But that was one of them where the general idea is good. How would that play out, and how much value it is compared to the environment we are right now? It's mostly when there's a lot of censoring that you really feel in that way, that there's a need for that kind of thing, because then there won't be able to, if we had a way to have Twitter, for example, or YouTube fully decentralized, and that was really the go-to platform for everyone, then from day one, they would never have been able to block those videos or whatever, because they would not have been in control, but they were with YouTube.
Yeah.
So I see value in that. Now it's just the way it's delivered is to be established. Another thing that I like, it's not a coin, but it's just a general concept, and it's the trading, like Uniswap, for example, where on Ethereum you can trade two coins or two tokens or whatever directly with their pool. It's crude. It's not perfect, and the miners could be front running the transactions. They know it's in their pool. They create a new one they will insert in front, or that kind of thing. There's a lot of things that maybe needs improvement. And maybe at some point we'll have something way more advanced. And what I like about the concept is, like, look at that. Bitcoin is traded 24/7 outside of those things. Eventually, I'm anarcho-capitalist, and I don't believe we need the SEC, and I don't believe any of those regulations. And you can imagine where stocks are traded as a token on a blockchain, and they can be exchanged 24/7. They could be exchanged on an exchange, dedicated exchange as well, Charles Schwab's account, or any E-Trade, whatever. The thing is, then there is a custodian. We all talk about the importance of not your keys, not your coins. Well, when you have to trade, or I want to buy some token of this company, shares of this company, and represented in token, then you'll need to drop your Bitcoin into this exchange and all that. But if you have a mechanism with this, then you can purely be, without ever having your keys left, you're always holding the tokens with your keys.
Yeah.
And that's one benefit I see too. How it might be not in the best way right now, and certainly not on the best of the Ethereum, for example, has so much problem. So how could that eventually be crafted into a layer 2, layer 3 over Bitcoin? And that's something I would really look for. And I believe this could be in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, because it's a different sort of approach to a lot of Bitcoiners, in the sense that you're saying, look, I'm a free market guy. I'm also trying to be as objective as I can. I'm looking at these things and I'm saying there might be some value here. Some value. I'm not saying that I would invest in these things. I'm not saying that I like them right now, but there's something. And it reminds me of a presentation a guy here in Australia did. We've got sort of 3 times a year we do what's called the Bush Bash. It's like I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a conference that happens in the middle of it's in these small little towns, and Bitcoiners drive from all over. The next one's actually happening in at the end of November, and I'm driving sort of the 9 hours down from Brisbane.
Well,
and what he said was, he goes like, and this was at the last one guy said, who's actually a developer in the space, he said, if there's a little kid and he comes to you with a drawing and he's like, look at my drawing, you're like, that's a crap drawing, go and do better. And he comes back and he's like, okay, what do you think now, Dad? And you're like, that sucks, go back. Do you think he's going to come back like a 3rd time and a 4th time and say, so what he's trying to say is basically like, and he was talking about this in the context of developers, he's like, we need to be welcoming, we need to be more open-minded, we need to be able to like at least attract the talent to help, saying, look, what are you guys building over there on whatever blockchain it is? You find some of the good faith people that are sincerely trying to do something good, not the people who are just trying to make a quick buck or trying to scam people. We can obviously disregard those people, and how do we try and attract them to say, come and work on Bitcoin? And you had this interesting idea around smart contracts or scripts or whatever the hell. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but you know what I mean? So perhaps what you're saying is, we can build some of these things in Bitcoin, but it requires the people in Bitcoin to have an open mind to bring these people over. If everything we tell these crypto people is like, you guys are scammers, you're all stupid, etc., it's probably going to slow down the ability for that stuff to happen on Bitcoin.
I mean, all the shitcoin talk, using the word shitcoin, is derogatory. And I mean, we want to convince those people that the importance. And many of those, I realize, their first step is they are not even Austrian school. They don't understand the goal that Bitcoin is for. And that's one reason why in my Bitcoin versus Altcoin, I dedicated in chapter 2 an important part where I'm trying to show, okay, what is Bitcoin and its proof of work is fighting is the current system and the proof of debt that is using. And so many of those, they haven't heard anything about those things. And They just heard from their cousins or whatever, their brother-in-law, this XYZ coin. First of all, sometimes it's just purely from price, and sometimes it's the project. You might have a mix. Some will be really fascinated by what that coin wants to do, its intention, and all that, and they're fascinated. And at the same time, the get rich quick is also in the mindset there. But they don't understand the all those core concept of proof of stake, proof of work, and why it's important to have decentralization. An example I see is XRP. There's a lot of XRP fans, and some are, anti-government. They're gold bugs, and you like Peter Schiff kind of thing, but they dismiss Bitcoin because they looked at it. It doesn't work. It's long, takes 10 minutes for confirmation, and Lightning Network is complicated, and on all the laundry list of examples why they're bitching on it. But and they love XRP, and it's like, what? And because XRP is one of the worst, and it's in the top 10. It's been in the top 10 for so many years, and it's actually one of the the consensus is one of the most horrible in terms of the least decentralization, if you can still call it decentralization.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more likely a very not it's a database that is being distributed. It's more like this. That's the best example. And but they're really a fan of it, and they dismiss the concept of proof of authority and so on. They're focused only on top of that, how beneficial it will be to replace the SWIFT system, which is completely, the way that wire transfers are done is ridiculous. Totally agree. So now for them, it's like, okay, it seems like their mindset is like, we're going to keep rolling the same way we've been rolling since the 60s or 70s, with fiat system still around and gold to protect us. But at the same time, I'll be able to make money with XRP is going to help the current system. So it's like, I'd like to have a conversation at some point with one-on-one with them, because one of the YouTuber, puts up comments, it never replies, well, he probably has, too many comments, but it's like, I wish I had a debate with them, to understand exactly what is going on in their mind, because I have not captured everything precisely, how much they are aware of the problems. All I see is they see it as how beneficial is going to be to fix the SWIFT system, which is still running SWIFT system, a fiat system. Or even if it's gold back, again, gold back is like, my God, you have to realize who's going to be auditing the gold. We're going to be running into the same issues over and over again. Something we cannot.
Yeah, it's one of the things I say often, Phil, is that to me, so many of these crypto projects are more like, it's just kind of fiat under a different name. Like, I think XRP or whatever is just a perfect example. I mean, every Bitcoiner would say, yeah, SWIFT is garbage. Like, we do not want to use it. But you don't have to make the leap of faith to go, okay, SWIFT is crap. Now let's use this token that was kind of pre-mined by a bunch of entrepreneurs and speculators and venture capitalists. So, like, is there not some sort of other system that we can employ that would be just as efficient? I mean, like,
which starts with a B.
Yeah, it starts with a B. There's also this other technology where we can actually have final settlement instantaneously on layer 2, at your fingertips. And I think going forward, what we're going to see more of is these stable sats type solutions where, people are worried about the volatility of Bitcoin. And, as you pointed out earlier, like baby Bitcoin was all over the show. And now, it looked like an altcoin. And now it's becoming a little bit less volatile, but it's still super volatile if compared to gold. And eventually when it grows up to be big brother and, starts looking down on gold, it too will become boring. And it'll be like this gray, boring rock that you can send through cyberspace, and, at almost zero cost, that is, infinitely scarce. So, I think yeah, from that perspective, I totally understand what you're saying. Let's go back to something you said earlier about, anarcho-capitalism, the SEC.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
background, I didn't mention necessarily, was I was a lawyer
Okay.
very long, but so obviously the rules in some sense make sense to me. And I go, look, when it comes to the SEC, I think they've done a terrible job just in terms of regulating the space. I just think that Gary Gensler is entirely captured. He's just a careerist. He doesn't care about investors or protecting them. He cares about Gary, because what he says, what he said during MIT has nothing to do with what he's saying now. It's obvious, right?
Well, let me inject something here, because
Yes.
in regards to XRP, there's, I'm not going to name the person, but there's someone I know who has a strong belief that this whole thing, XRP and the lawsuit against XRP, is actually just a show. Because not sure if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island.
I haven't, but I'm very familiar with its the sense of
It's a must-read book
to read.
and
Yes.
and one of the thing is deception is one of the key point that the central bankers have been using, and they pretend at the time, it's like, this Federal Reserve Act, we don't like it, it's not good for business. They were saying that they're the one who crafted in secret the act, and one of the senators, Aldrin, who was in there at that location on Jekyll Island to help craft the Federal Reserve, submit it and all that, they're the one who actually created it, and they said, no, it's not good. And so the crowd is like, oh my God, the banks don't like it, so it must be good,
Yeah.
So the question is, are we seeing the same thing with XRP? It's like, okay, the SEC is suing XRP and the folks, and then, the Ripple. Wow, I guess the government doesn't like XRP. Doesn't, but when you look at it, one of the easiest coin, if they wanted to do any kind of seizing XRP coins or blocking transactions and all that, will be XRP, a proof of authority coin. All they have to do is knock on the door of Ripple and says, okay, now you're going to do those things, and you're going to prevent those transactions from going on. You're going to any kind of censorship, or they'll have an easy way to do it. Not with Bitcoin. So that's one way I look at it. It's like, was it because right now all the XRP guys are all big handling. They're really happy they keep saying XRP is the only coin with the legal clarity in the USA. Now, suddenly, wow, now that it's resolved, they're the only one. Imagine that. Well, sometimes they'll say Bitcoin 2, sometimes they won't. It depends, but depending who you listen to.
Yeah.
But it's just hilarious to see this. But yeah.
That's a great insight. That's actually, I never thought about that, because it's like the 4D chess thing, and politics is all about theater, and it's about, pretending, and it's about keeping people docile and making them think one thing and then doing another. Like, I've gone down all these rabbit holes. I've seen you tweeting some stuff lately, like, whether it's 9/11, like, what the hell actually happened there? Like, really? And then it's like, all of these forever wars, and you go like, trillions of dollars going after, trying to spread democracy everywhere. Like, what's really going on? There's always these things behind the scenes. Like, was Iraq really just about young baby George, being able to help avenge the losses his father suffered? Was it because Saddam wanted to sell oil in Europe? Like, there's all these things, but it's never whatever you see in front of your eyes. It's very rarely the case. And we can even say that with this latest, pandemic story. It was like, it's all just sort of like, it's all kind of a show. And I love it. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I love that adversarial thinking from Bitcoiners, because it's about thinking a little layer deep. Most people don't necessarily think beyond their noses, and I say that with respect, because they're busy, they've got lives, but there's people behind the scenes that are playing games. And so, so to go back to that whole sort of SEC thing, like you said something about, like, well, you think that basically the SEC is, you don't necessarily believe they should be in existence, and I suppose the one thing I would push back on is to say, like, look, I am being a Bitcoiner, I'm also a freedom maximalist and I'm a free marketeer. Like, I don't like government getting involved because I think they are the worst at everything. They just couldn't, because there's no price that they pay because it's other people's money, right? Or they'll just print more. But the one thing I don't like is I don't like deception, and I don't like people that are deliberately misleading. So, if I go out and I'm deliberately going like, here's this, burger, it'll cure cancer, and then everyone runs out Charles burgers and I become a billionaire. I don't think many people would say like, I deserve it or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I'm also always conscious though, Phil, of the idea of like, I don't want some big daddy government bureaucrat constantly being able to go, shh, we'll protect you. We've got your best interest. So it's like, for me, it's a very, I agree with you in some respects, but in the other respects, I'm like, I don't like the idea that I think that a lot of these, and I'll use the term derogatory because I got traumatized by them, shitcoiners. I think that they're deliberately trying to deceive retail investors to enrich themselves. And so to me, in many ways, I want an SEC to be like, we know what you are. You're basically trying to raise money illegally without disclosures. Like, you're a property guy. And so maybe you're like, and I'm a property guy. Well, yeah. So I kind of, here's the example. Me and Phil want to create a property fund. It's called like, Dale Phil Properties. It's got 100 properties and we decide we're going to IPO it. What kind of disclosures are you and I going to have to make about our shareholding, the management structure, our strategy, our respective experience? Like, what have you done for, like, all these kind of things? Investors deserve to know that, as far as I'm concerned. And otherwise, I can't raise from the public. If I want to raise from my parents, that's fine, but the average Joe. So in that sense, we have to comply with the rules. But all you and I need to do is call it prop tech blockchain. Oh, we've got 100 properties underlying this blockchain, and we can go and do an ICO, and we don't have to tell anyone anything.
So I have 2 points here.
I'd love to hear him.
Yeah. So the first one is entrepreneurs are looking for trouble. That's the perfect way I mentioned. There's a problem. You imagine tomorrow all the governments are abolished. Now suddenly the role of the SEC and equivalent, all that, they're gone, and FDA and so on. What happens then? So either people are screw as well. I'm pharmaceutical, what pills I'm going to have, which one have a side effect, and so on. I think actually we'll be even better served with entrepreneurs who are looking for trouble, where it says, what, I'm going to create an organization and its sole branding that is going to have to be protecting strongly its branding by showing that we're always right, by picking the right pharmaceutical products. No, we're not approving this because we've done enough tests with that. We see that there's a side effect of those things. Same thing with the SEC. Now suddenly anyone who is being approved by this organization that his sole purpose is just to vet. Okay, show me all the books. I want to interview everybody around and so on. You're going to have a better result from the enterprise, from a private enterprise, who might have to compete again, maybe another form of branding or several of them. And then having a government who's, have a monopoly where the people and a revolving door, so people have the FDA ends up working for the pharmaceutical they actually approve, and so on. It's just like, come on. Now, someone might say, oh, if you've seen well, okay, I'll come back to that. I'm going to answer the second part.
Yes.
Even if that does not happen, in terms of investment, when you come, at least maybe not to drugs and another thing, but when it comes to investment, the best way for people to learn is actually get burned. It's as sad as it is. And the younger they are when they start investing, the less money typically they're going to have to burn, to throw into something. And now they're going to be, I need to be really careful. I've been burned with this thing. Now, when I see an ICO, I'm not going to invest in that unless I really have a chance to do some real digging behind all these things. I'm going to have to, so if I feel like I'm not sure I'm able to, I'm not going to do it, because they'll be more conservative in their approach. And again, it boils down again also to the mindset of what happens when we are in a fiat world. It accelerates those problems even more because people really feel they need to speculate to combat inflation. And so they're more likely to look, and the more and more people to look at, yeah, I know, but there's so much shit. I am going to have to do so much spending in 5 years, 10 years when my kid's going to go to college and so on. I need to take those risks and invest in those ICO. That kind of mindset is more likely to happen in an inflationary world than if we're on a Bitcoin standard where, it's not, all I have to do is pile up my Bitcoins. And in 20 years, in 10 years, my kids are ready for college. I'll have it because I'm going to accumulate that much and it's going to cost that much. All the prices are fixed, or relatively fixed, very compared to what we have today. All of those side effects will disappear. There's those bad problems of forcing people to speculate. And so you'll have less people getting burned with those things, more people being naturally conservative in their approach. So that's the other angle to that. So basically, I answer in those two angles. For me, the government is not really relevant in any case. Anything the government does, the private sector would do better, or at the same, or even better.
Yeah.
And to come back with The Big Short, in that scene, I'm not sure if you've seen the movie, The Big Short.
I've watched it about 10 times. My wife says no more.
It's a freaking good movie.
Yeah.
The scene where they go to talk to that lady with the glasses, and she's working at one of those rating agencies, and they say, well, if we don't give them aid, they'll go down the street and go and vote for the other. Nobody got, any of those people never got any, they did not get burned and all that. But right now, we don't see a full free market capitalism in place. We were not into this crazy world. These agencies will be relevant in no matter of no time. There'll be new ones springing up, or the existing, there'll be more competition. I mean, right now, it's like, why we only have two, people should ask, is because they only want to have only two of them. There's so many things that we are not aware of, that when the regulations are piled up, and one best example I point out as the best way to show how much a pile of regulations affect things, where so much that the root cause is so far away from all the symptoms of being. You create a root cause, we're going to fix it with another regulation that create another problem. So they create another regulation to fix the other symptoms of them. And so you end up with 20 regulations down the road, and things are even worse. And that is the healthcare sector in the US. During the war, the Americans were not, they had the price control, salary cap. Instead of having a salary minimum, there was maximum salary. Basically, because of the war, you cannot, they did not want to have inflation, so they actually had the cap on salaries, and the government imposed one of those crazy things that FDR did. And so what the companies did is, so I will offer you free healthcare, with this, and free health insurance. And that's how the US started, with employers giving health insurance. They don't give health car insurance. You get a car, you work at a place, they're not going to, I know it's free healthcare and it's universal healthcare in Australia.
Yeah.
But in the US, it's not. And employers, typically all of them, will cover your health insurance. And that dates back to this. Wow. First problem, first symptom. And then that leads to multiple side effects, including people are not aware of the cost associated with this, because they're not incurring the cost of higher inflation or higher health insurance, because the premiums, all that, it's mostly the employer paying for those things. So imagine if your car insurance was paid by the employer, and you wreck the car and you don't know, it just went up by 10% the next year, but you don't know about it, or barely know about it. And that's the kind of thing where they'll be more wasteful, and it's also, but that's just a tiny bit it's a tiny piece of the story.
Yeah, those are small examples of how change,
but there's multiple
ripple effects,
including that there's not free competition across all healthcare. And there's no I mean, you've got so many car insurance companies, at least there's still regulation in the car industry and the car insurance industry, but it's nothing compared to health insurance. But the health insurance, you don't have much of a choice on two, 3, 4 max, depending on the state. While you're going to have 10, 20 car insurance companies offering their ability and plenty of advertisements and so on. We don't have that kind of competition in the healthcare industry in the US. And so that's another layer of things. So that shows you, the more pile up regulations at some point, and it's so many industries that people don't realize that it's all those piles up of regulations are the root cause of all the problems. And the SEC and that systems is another example as well, that people, because the SEC is there, people think, well, we're safe because the SEC is there and they haven't said a word and they haven't done anything about the ICOs and or they haven't done anything about Enron, and until it was too late. And so many other examples like that.
You point that in your book.
Madoff. Madoff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think I do agree with you in that sense where it's like, I can't think of an example of anything that government does that would be worse done by the private sector. So I'll take the example of South Africa, where you might have some very, and this is like, so you're talking all about like, a developed nation and, talking about regulations and healthcare and all those kinds of things. And I couldn't agree more, okay? Because we see it here in Australia, public healthcare system, because it's free, shockingly, more people just take advantage. So, sometimes if you want serious stuff done, it takes forever. Like if you want to replace your knee and all that kind of stuff, good luck. Wait for like 6 months, 12 months, because you're not actually paying.
At least with Canada, they can go to US and pay for it.
Come across the border there.
Pay for it, but at least
get
it done.
So then, like, I think of South Africa. So South Africa was kind of a tricky one where, all right, you had many years of discrimination and apartheid, and the government then, the sort of newly elected government in 94 says, all right, you know what? We want to try and help kind of rebalance wealth. We want to try and help redistribute wealth. And you might say that's a good or bad idea. What they have done, though, is just through a slew of regulations have created all sorts of untold chaos. Like, so firstly, rather than privatizing the electrical grid, they have maintained the monopoly because it enables them to, basically employ their friends and family. So what happens? Rolling blackouts are the norm, okay? And that's since 94. So how many years is that, right? And so that's, and energy is like the base layer. And so you can't get that right. All right. The infrastructure is crumbling because you allocate the contract to your friends and family. All right, well, that's just corruption. All right. What about regulations? Then you go, all right, there's this thing called BEE, Black Economic Empowerment. So there's a sliding scale where you got white males at the bottom and then black females at the top. And so literally, depending on how dark your skin is, you are more or less worthy and you get allocated points. And basically,
are you saying it's based on the color of the skin?
It's pretty much like that. So in other words, and
so they look at the chart and look, okay, you're at this level because of this color of skin.
100%. So like a black male doesn't score as highly as a black female, as an example. So they'll say, what is your shareholding? Who are your contractors? And who are your employees, et cetera, et cetera. So what they've tried to do, and you might even say, like, let's try and equalize society, because these people, like the apartheid government, were racist and they did all these things. Well, what's happened? You've basically got this, what's a class of, what are they called? Tenderpreneurs. These are guys who have no real skills. They are politically connected individuals. And you've just created this class of elite black dudes who are raking in cash just by virtue of their political connections. And the real people, I'm talking the 62 million people there, for the average person, life is 0% better under this new regime. And despite all your best efforts, it hasn't even changed a single thing for many people. So you kind of think there are, and then I look at what private people are doing and how private people are, whether it's through charity, whether it's through, doing various things in their lives, directly impacting real people's lives in a material sense, helping buy them homes, helping pay for their education. That matters. And so it's like, it's another example of, like, in a completely different world, where government is just basically pretending to do the right thing, making the right noises. The masses are like, woohoo, that sounds great. And actually, all that it does is create an elitist class, a new elitist class, and the average person suffers. So, yeah, I do agree with you there in that sense. For it's, I suppose, in the anarcho-capitalist world, here's the challenge. I would say, all right, well, there we are. We're in this new world, and what we're saying is, guys, trust us. We will. The private sector will do things better over time, and you're going to get stung. And then someone gets stung, and they're like, "Protect me, save me," you know. Because this is why the system. We need government. We need regulators, and so it's like, it's a nice concept, but I don't ever see it happening. You know, like I use the example of pools here in Australia. Like, you know, there's many things that are very dangerous, you know, potentially in life. And one of them is obviously having your kids drown. And it's terrible. And I mean, it's obviously tragic, and it happens all the time, right? In South Africa, there is no real regulation around pools. Here, doesn't like it's you're going to have signage and CPR, you know, and this whole like spiel, because it's almost like the government's saying, like, we don't trust you to be able to manage your own children. So what we'll do is we'll make you put all this fencing at certain heights with certain signage, and, you know, so you can't even put a bloody pool in without just having government sort of, you know, mandated and stuff. So it's something I grapple with regularly, but I don't think there's a solution there, Phil. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, we've touched on a lot of interesting things, and I really enjoyed this last bit here, because, you know, the debating the sort of philosophical aspects of anarcho-capitalism and everything, and how Bitcoin in a sort of hard money world can change a lot of the incentives long run. I like what you said earlier also about how, you know, I suppose people tend to need to learn by getting burnt. And there's no real evidence that all of these guardians who are trying to put up rails to protect us have done so, whether it's in the GFC, whether it's with the pool signs or whatever it might be, you know, and that generally speaking, you could say about the FDA. I mean, honestly, what a sham. So sorry, say what you're going to say there.
The BFTA, you said?
No, so the FDA, sorry, the US there. I mean, it's just, it's quite, it's exactly like the SEC, you know, sort of Gary will be there, then he'll go to Goldman Sachs, then he'll go to Treasury, then he'll go to the SEC.
All of them.
And it's the same with the FDA. We'll go with Pfizer, then we'll come back.
EPA was the same thing with EPA, and Environmental Protection Agency protection. You know, what I like about Jeff Berwick, he comes up with all the real name for those things, like Department of Defense, or he calls that Department of Offense. And which makes sense. And Social Security, socialist insecurity. It's all those things. And whenever you see the word security, it's more like insecurity. They want people to be insecure about this, so we have a reason for them to be there. So it is. The agency is more about insecurity than security.
It's so funny. And it's like, when it comes to all of these things, we often talk in Bitcoin about incentives, and you often have to just think about the incentives and the structures behind them. And most people don't just have the time or energy or inclination or critical thinking nature to go and ask the questions, you know, why is such a large chunk of media funded by Big Pharma? How much of the FDA is actually funded by Big Pharma? Like here in Australia, we have the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Association. I don't know what the percentage was, but it was really high, like 75+% of their funding comes from pharmaceutical companies. So what do you think they're going to recommend? I mean, honestly, you know, so they're not going to recommend free stuff, stuff that you can do, like walk or get in the sun, you know? So this is why I always enjoy talking.
Walking is bad.
Exactly. Don't go. Get your sunscreen on. No, Phil, this has been really good and long overdue. And I strongly recommend to anyone to have a squiz at Phil's book, The Bitcoin versus Altcoins, The Battle for Dominance. It's a really easy read. If you want to try and develop more of a nuanced understanding of kind of crypto, without just calling them shit coins and, you know, screaming and shouting, and you want to have, like, you know, informed takes and be able to have discussions with your peers about it, I definitely recommend it. There's not that many books out there that kind of stand out on that topic alone. And I'll put links in the show notes for that. But yeah, Phil, did you want to give the listeners a handoff to anywhere? Is there anywhere else you want to direct them?
Well, actually, no, more like my Twitter account, egg_descrambler, EGG_descrambler. And it's it's a funny story why I picked that handle. But yeah, I was in electrical engineering and in my study in university. And back in the 90s, there were, for decoders for watching private channels that were paying channels.
Yeah.
It was analog, it was not digital. So the signal was scrambled. And so some company, whatever, some newspaper published the schematic for a descrambler. And so I had printed that out. It was on my desk before a class, and I just put egg before the descrambler, just for the joke of it.
Yeah.
And it was picked up as a joke and so on. And when I needed a handle, it's like I remember this sequence. Yeah, that'll be funny. What handle? I could have picked Phil Champagne because it was in 2008, but the idiot here wanted something special. And
Yeah. Oh,
that's
well.
it.
Okay. Well, Phil, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining, and keep up the good fights and the work, and hopefully we get to meet in person.
Thank you very much, El. Yeah, and I wish we will, and probably next year it'll be good.
Holding thumbs. Awesome, Phil. Take care. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and that you got some value out of it. Either way, hit me up on Twitter and let me know what you think. My handle is Dale21M. If you've got any suggestions as to people you think I should be talking to or topics I should address too, I would love that sort of feedback. Otherwise, if you want to support the show, there's a couple different ways you can do that. The first is just to share it amongst your friends and family. The more that people hear the message that Bitcoin and crypto are not the same thing, the better. And I want to help people understand that. The second thing you can do is give me a 5-star review on whichever podcast app you're using. Of course, that's only if I deserve it. And last but not least, if you want to stream sats my way via the Fountain app, I'm not going to say no, but it's not expected. Thank you so much for your support thus far. It means the world to me. I appreciate the hell out of you, and the best is yet to come. Much love, friends. I'll see you on the other side.